This week on Carnivore, we're going to be using some of the venison we've recently killed in order to make Hirsch Goulasch, which sounds kind of exotic, but it's a traditional German or Austrian dish which uses some of the cheapest cuts, cheapest ingredients possible, but tastes like $1 million. First of all is obviously going to be our venison. So we've got about 2.5 pounds of venison here, and it can be any cut you like. The cheaper cuts are going to take a little bit longer to cook, but they're also more rewarding in terms of flavor profile. The other thing we have here is 3/4 of a bottle of red wine. You could use cheap cooking wine, however, it's only 3/4 of a bottle, which means that 1/4 of a bottle is your reward for cooking. Now, the other stuff we have on the table, of course, are onions. You can't make a good sauce without onions. We have onions, we have some shallots. We have, as our thickening agent, you could use in this recipe flour, white flour, typically seen in most Western cookery, but we've elected to grate up a potato for this, and the potato is just going to cook down, simmer to nothing, and just become that starchy base that we need to make some delicious gravy. Other things we have in the recipe are our spices, and we have some salt, obviously, some paprika. I really like smoked paprika for this. And then we have some bay leaves, we have some peppercorns, whole peppercorns, we have some juniper berries, some cloves, and some smoked peppers from my garden. Then the last finishing touch of what we have here, or the pièce de résistance, in order to give it a little bit of fruitiness, in order to balance out some of the richness of the rest of the ingredients, is typically you'd use lingonberry jam. However, we couldn't get lingonberry jam in Scotland, so we elected to use some cranberry sauce. Finally, we've got some herbs that you're going to be familiar with. We have some rosemary and some thyme, and those are going to be added in order to just give that full depth of flavor. So I'm going to take all my ingredients from here. I'm going to batch fry and brown my meat, and then I'm going to add in the rest of my ingredients, put it on a simmer. It'll simmer for 45 minutes to 3 hours, depending on the cut of meat you have. And then we're going to bring it out and serve it with a little bit of mashed potato and some braised cabbage. All right, let's get to work. Add some oil into this pan. And then I'm going to batch fry our venison. Oh yeah. It's best not to add too much, because what you don't want to do is get to the situation where all the moisture comes out of the meat and you end up stewing it rather than browning it. All right, we just finished batch browning the meat. I'm now going to add the onions and soften those. You can see all of that delicious meaty goodness that's baked to the bottom of the pan is now coming out, and seasoning the onions. All right, now that the onions have cooked down and softened and really reduced in volume, what I'm going to do now is add the potato in as our thickening agent, and then deglaze the pan with some red wine. All right. There we go. I'm going to dig all that meaty goodness out of the bottom of that pan so it turns into delicious gravy. All right, next thing up, I'm just going to season all this. All right, hit a little paprika. I love the smokiness and the richness that the paprika gives to this recipe. And then season with a little salt, just a little bit. And then I'm going to add bay leaves for a little kick, the smoked peppers from our garden, some juniper berries, whole peppercorns, cloves, and our secret ingredient. So last night I took the bone out of this delicious shoulder of venison. I took the bone out, I then roasted it in a hot oven, took the bone out after it was roasted, boiled it, and then made stock, and I made 2 pints, a full quart of stock. And that is what's left of it after being reduced. So this is delicious venison meaty goodness put back into this recipe. Once that's in, I'm going to give that a good stir. I'm going to add the rest of my red wine. I'm going to add the rest of my meat back into the pot. And then this is going to simmer for 45 minutes to however long it takes. After an hour or so of simmering on the stove, our Hirsch goulash is ready to serve to the 4 hungry hunters that I've been out with on the hill all afternoon. Now I've got some mashed potatoes here, I've got some braised cabbage. Normally I'd go with red cabbage just for a little bit of color contrast, but this is what we had available to us. But I'm going to go over the stove now, grab our Hirsch goulash, put it on the table, start serving. Oh yeah, that smells pretty freaking good. Now a little potatoes, a little cabbage, because greens are important, guys, and then a whole lot of venison. Oh yeah, look at that. All those onions have reduced down, produce a wonderful gravy. There you go, Hirsch goulash, carnivore, up your game.